Okay. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Toby Hay, and I'm the director of the Career Development Center. Really happy to have two guest presenters with us tonight and to tackle really important topics of saving money and getting ready to pay off your student loans, because I know that is on students' minds. Before we really get into the meat of it, though, I'm going to go ahead and ask our presenters just to briefly introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Hannah, you're up.
Oh, sorry. My name is Hannah Provost. I am a local financial advisor, and I work with people in all walks of life, whether they're, sometimes still in high school to 90 plus years old and working on their estate plans. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about how to manage your money.
And I'm Carrie Leupold. I work over in the financial aid office, and I miss you guys. I wish we were doing this face-to-face. I miss being in my office and not having you here to visit with me. But we're still here for you no matter what. And, email and phone call has been the best way for you to get in touch with us. We're doing video calls as well, if you'd like. So reach out to us anytime you need our help.
Thank you, Carrie and Hannah. So we're going to talk about saving money, getting ready to pay off those student loans. We want this to be really practical and useful information for you students. So we've tried to anticipate your questions, but we may not have done that perfectly. So I hope you'll feel like you can participate. You can unmute yourself, I believe, at any point and ask a question, or if you want to just put it in the chat box, I will keep an eye on that and share those questions with our presenters. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and have her kick things off about student loans.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to share my screen just because there's a couple of screenshots that I want you to see. Give me one sec. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the screen now that says studentaid.gov. And the reason we're starting there is because we're going to discuss what you'll experience in some of the communications that'll happen and some of the steps to plan for when you are finishing college and in that period of time between when you've completed school and you're just getting ready to pay your student loans back or start your repayment. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happen possibly when you're in repayment and need some options and opportunities. So studentaid.gov is really the hub. It's like your central resource for you to be able to get information on the things that are happening with your federal student loans. And that wording was intentional because some of you have experienced or have borrowed through private student loan programs. Some of you also may have the federal nursing loan or possibly even the federal Perkins loan. And if you have any of those sources of loan assistance, and if you're not sure, give me a call or send me an email and I can give you a breakdown of your loan history and give you an idea of what types of loans you've borrowed and therefore who you may be needing to communicate with post-graduation. But if you do have a nursing loan, a Perkins loan, or private student loans, this website's not useful for managing those. When you graduate, for your federal student loans, you have a 6-month grace period. That's an automatic period of time between your last date of enrollment and your first date of repayment of those federal student loans. During that 6-month grace period, you will receive communications, typically via email, from somebody called your federal loan servicer. And you may have been borrowing these last several years, but not really have an idea yet of who your federal loan servicer is. And we're guilty of it, that we send multiple email communications along with everybody else. and you've had all these years to manage your Plattsburgh email account, and that can get a little bit overwhelming trying to decipher which emails are important and should be read and require some type of action maybe, and the ones that aren't necessarily important or even relevant. So you may have heard from your loan servicer these last few years, but are unaware that that's who was reaching out to you. So the first suggestion I have at studentaid.gov is to click on the link that says, "Who's my servicer?" And it will give you guidance. You can call a 1-800 number and the federal processor will give you information on who your servicer is. Or there's also a list on that page, from that page that has all of the federal loan servicers listed. And when you see that list, you might have some recognition. Oh yeah, I've gotten emails from them, or maybe some mail communications from them. So that's important for you to know, because the reason your servicer is reaching out to you during that 6-month time frame is they want you to become a little prepared for that start of federal student loan repayment. They also need to collect information from you. It's very possible you may end up with a new email address post-graduation. You've been using as a primary email address your Plattsburgh one. You may choose to use a different email address, or likely will choose to use a different email address post-graduation, and they're going to want that info. You may move and have a new mailing address. They're also going to be giving you information on the various student loan repayment plans, and we'll talk about those a little bit in a second. So it's important that you identify who your loan servicer is, make contact with them, or at least pay attention to the contacts they make with you. And then most of the time what students do, they all have web portals. Just like you log into My Plattsburgh, you're going to log into Fed Loan Servicing or whoever your loan servicer is after registering for an account with them. And that's where you'll see everything you need to know about your loans, the status that they're currently in, how much you've borrowed. They'll give you links to all the different repayment plans and give you options to sign up online for your various options. Also, during that 6-month time frame before you start repaying, you're going to hear from us. So yes, you've graduated, but those outstanding tracking requirement notices that you've gotten from us all these years, every time we think we want to gather some piece of information from you or want you to take some kind of action, you get an email from financial aid that says you have outstanding tracking requirements. Go to My Plattsburgh to learn more. You're going to get another one of those even after you graduate, or maybe a few if you don't respond right away. And that is to notify you of something called exit counseling. And there's also a link on the screenshot I'm showing you here to complete exit counseling. Exit counseling is the exact same information, but presented to you in a different way as the entrance counseling you did when you first became student loan borrowers. So exit counseling gives you all the information you need about what it means to now be entering the obligation phase of repaying your student loans, what your options are, what the federal government provides to you as far as securities and opportunities as a federal student loan borrower, as far as those different repayment plans and postponing your loans if you need to or want to. So exit counseling is going to give you all that info about, like, sort of the sneak peek of what happens now that you're entering repayment. It even gives you guidance on, well, what if you're not really done with college? What if you're moving on to grad school? Or what if you're taking a break and maybe doing a VISTA program, or becoming involved in military service, or whatever your next steps are? They give you a lot of information there on how that your next steps relate to your federal student loan obligations. Now, I know I keep saying federal student loans, and I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring all the other types of loans. If you have a federal Perkins or a federal nursing loan, you will hear from, there's only one servicer for those, and it's called the SUNY Student Loan Servicing Center. we will actually mail you in paper mail form, as well as email some information about your federal nursing and Perkins loan if you have those. And that's where you'll get contact information for that loan servicer. And then your private student loans, Sally Mae, Discover, Wells Fargo, whoever has been, VSAC, whoever has been your private lender, they'll be in contact with you as well on their opportunities for repaying your debt with them. So it's very possible you may have more than one lender to repay. So like every other part of financial aid that you've experienced from the start of your education, everything I just said sounds a little bit overwhelming and a little bit frustrating because it is a bunch of different steps and it's a lot to manage, which is no different than what you've been doing all these years, managing all the different types of financial aid that you've accessed and managing your student bills and your payments and things like that. So if nothing else, what I really want is for you to remember, you don't have to remember studentaid.gov. You don't have to remember all these things that are going to happen in the 6 months or will happen in the 6 months after you graduate. If nothing else, at least remember that the financial aid office here at SUNY Plattsburgh is a resource for you, even when you're not a student any longer. You can't remember who your servicer is or don't know if they've been in contact, or you're not sure when your repayment starts, or you don't understand the different repayment plan options. Give us a call, talk with me. We'll do a video chat. I can send you email information. I can look up information for you and communicate that back to you. So there's really no need to be concerned or confused as you go along, because if nothing else, you can just reach out to us and get the answers you need, or at least let us help point you in the right direction. I am going to show you one other screenshot. Again, I'm intentionally not giving you too much information because I know that it can be a bit overwhelming right now, and because it's not really relevant to you right at this moment, it's hard to absorb some of this. But I also want to show you a website.
I do have one question too, Carrie, when you're ready.
Please go ahead.
Where can we confirm if our lender has the right contact information?
Right, good question. So when you find out who that loan servicer is and visit their website, they all will have an option for you to register as a user on their website. And usually registration is just, some basic demographic information. And then immediately you have access to their portal, and they then will be able to communicate with you everything they know about you as a borrower. So it'll have a contacts page, and you can update things like email addresses and phone numbers and mailing addresses and things like that. And they also have toll-free phone numbers, so you could always call them. Your account number is your social security number usually. So you just call them and give them your account number or social security number, and then you can even update them over the phone. But usually their website is how you'll communicate any changes they need to know about you. Good question. There is this little known support program, and I'm not sure why it's not spotlighted more or advertised more, but it's really, really a very terrific and helpful program. New York State created several years back, maybe it's been almost 10 years ago, called the Get on Your Feet Loan Forgiveness Program. Possibly it's not as widely used because there is a lot of eligibility criteria to qualify. You have to apply for it when the application becomes available. It's not available year round. You have to apply within 2 years of completing your studies. You have to have graduated from a New York State high school or an equivalent of the New York State high school diploma. Sort of a strange requirement. You have to have earned a degree, not just stopped attending, and several other requirements. But what it does, once you research it and determine if you're eligible and submit your application, is it can possibly repay up to 2 years of your student loan debt for you. Those first couple years that can be pretty pivotal when you may just be locating employment and may just be getting settled into an income that may not quite be as much as you want maybe to get started. It really is sort of like one of those diamonds in the rough that people don't know about. So I wanted you to have the screenshot of their website. It's called Get on Your Feet Loan Forgiveness Program. Maybe bookmark it or make a note of it in your phone for when you graduate, in case you need some assistance with managing your student loan debt. I do have a couple other screenshots, but I think that it's probably going to be too difficult for this to be covered in a helpful way. It's just not relevant to you right at this moment. There are multiple repayment plans. So I guess really the one thing that I want to say about this is just remember that it's most important that you keep your student loans in what we call satisfactory standing. The loan servicers you're going to work with certainly understand that there are going to be times during your repayment obligation of your student loan that you can't repay at all, or the repayment plan that you're on has become unmanageable because you've had a job change or a job loss or anything like that. Just remember you've got multiple options, and your loan servicer is happy to work with you on letting you know what options are relevant to you and what ones might make your loan repayment more manageable. Where they're not really super cool about things is if you just ignore your student loan repayment and don't make payment at all, or don't put your loans in good standing. Then they're not too happy about that. It's best that you just keep in contact with them and let them help you when you need help regarding repayment options. And then last thing that I'll mention is deferment and forbearance options. So these are ways that you can intentionally, with permission, stop repaying your student loans for a period of time. And if you do that with your loan servicer's permission, then they remain happy with you. They're not mad at you. They're happy because you've pursued a deferment or forbearance option, and upon qualification, they've given you permission to hold off on making payments of your student loan. You do have to reach out and get that permission. It's not automatic. Just simply not paying your monthly payment doesn't automatically put you into any kind of positive deferment or forbearance status. So again, lots of options to properly manage your student loan debt in a way that keeps you on your budget goals, doesn't overwhelm you too much. Really the way to do it is to keep in touch with your loan servicer. And again, contact me if you have any trouble along the way, or you're just not sure where to turn next. I'll point you in the right direction and help you get there. That's what I've got, really.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Does that ruin the credit score?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. Yes, you do not want your student loans, any of your student loans, to become in bad standing. They can enter a delinquency phase, which is the first 9 months that you have not made satisfactory repayment. And then after those 9 months, they enter a default stage. Anywhere along that way, and definitely once you hit default, it absolutely will affect your credit, just like any other debt that you don't properly manage. And it is significant to all the future credit decisions you're going to want to make. Things as simple as getting a loan to buy a used car, or buying a house and getting a mortgage. All of those really important decisions you're going to be making over all these next years can be significantly and sometimes adversely impacted by your student loans not being in good standing. So all the more reason to keep in touch with your loan servicer and give me a call or send me an email if you're struggling with something, so we can give you some advice.
I was actually going to ask more specifically on, like, does deferment affect your credit score?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, deferment does not. So deferment, again, is a approved standing. So if you were to look at your student loans on your credit report at when they're in a period of deferment, they will still show as an existing debt, but they will show in good standing. They will not show as an adverse credit standing. Great question, Courtney. Yeah.
I have a quick question as well.
Yeah.
It's about the Get on Your Feet loan forgiveness program. I
Yeah.
plan on going to grad school right after I graduate in May. Like, am I eligible up until I get the graduate degree? Because I know it said you couldn't have higher than a bachelor's.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Lexi. The problem with the Get on Your Feet, not problem, I mean, it's a good program, but it is restrictive. And so in your particular scenario, it is restrictive because you have to be in repayment. And when you go from your undergraduate coursework to your graduate coursework, you actually, especially if you're going right away, like from May to August, you actually don't enter repayment. Your loans will continue to be deferred now at the graduate level. So unfortunately, it doesn't become an option available to you. They intentionally do not make it available to students who have a higher degree, a graduate degree. And I really think that that was a budgetary decision when they created the program. And it's unfortunate because graduate students tend to have a lot more debt than undergraduate students. So it would be really helpful. But unfortunately, it's not an opportunity. Now, if you take a break, if there's any reason you take a break between undergrad and grad, and you don't go to grad school right away, maybe it's a year later or something, then you might be able to qualify for the time frame between undergrad and grad work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, of course. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions at the moment, I'm gonna pass the screen to, Hannah, do you want the screen? I guess you can
Yeah.
grab it.
I'll
Yeah.
take it.
Okay.
All right, great. I have to show this for a moment just so that all my regulatory things are there. I don't know if any of you are finance students, but I was talking to Toby earlier today about all the requirements we have. So there it is. Once you do get to graduation, the most important thing is really going to be to start with a budget. The budget is going to be the framework that you use to make all of your other financial decisions. So whether it's looking for an apartment or buying a car, or what type of student loan program, repayment program you can afford, all of that's going to stem back to your budget. So there are lots of really effective ways to do this, and people will often ask me what's the best type of budget. I always say it's the one that you're going to actually stick with. So whatever is going to work best for you personally is what you should do. There's the old-fashioned paper and pencil that sometimes, if that's the only thing that you're doing with paper and pencil, it's really effective for people. There's also something called the envelope system, and I'm going to touch on that just for a moment because it works pretty well for some people. So the idea behind the envelope system is to make sure that either everything you spend, or at least anything that's kind of discretionary, like eating out, even gas money, things like that, you're doing it on purpose. And so with the envelope system, you would actually take cash out of the bank and put it in envelopes marked for different purposes. So whether it's, making sure that you set aside your rent money as soon as you get paid, or for some people, they use like a discretionary envelope. So it's just for things that they know they overspend on, whether it's going out to eat or whatever it is. Right now, it's kind of hard to be doing too much discretionary spending, but we'll get back to the time when we can. And then you just stop spending money when the envelope's empty. So that works for a lot of people. Most banks at this point have some sort of online banking system, and often there's a budgeting tool included with that. So that's going to be really convenient for people because they already know what all of your transactions are. You're not trying to get anything to link up there. So for some people, just using whatever they have with their bank is the most efficient way to do it. Or there are also all kinds of websites and apps, and there's new ones all the time. I'm sure that there are some that are much cooler than the ones that I've put out here. But there are 3 here that are widely used: mint.com, youneedabudget.com, which also has a lot of education behind it, and kind of the mindset of how you budget. And then everydollar.com is created by Dave Ramsey, who's a big financial wellness guru. And whether you believe everything he says or not, he does have a good budgeting website. That's really the first thing, is create that budget. And when I say create a budget, really you need to create 2 budgets. So the first budget is when things are kind of normal, right? Times are good. This is just an example budget. But I do want to point out a couple of things. So the first 2 items here are savings. It's really, really easy. And I see people at all walks of life doing this. It's really easy to not save if you don't plan to do it first. And so the most effective savers that I see are ones that make sure that's the first dollars going out of their paycheck. If you have it going automatically, all the better, but plan, what do you want to put in your retirement savings? What do you want to add to your emergency fund? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. The next is life insurance. And so for many of you, you may not need life insurance right out of the gate when you graduate. The exception would be if you have any private loans where someone else is going to be on the hook for them if something happens to you. You might want to consider life insurance. It is very inexpensive when you get term life insurance and you're young and healthy. So it's at least worth getting a quote on for whatever the amount of your student loans are. Most of the time, until you have someone else relying on you, you're not going to need any other insurance in addition to that. And then, of course, you want to pay your rent. You want to make your student loan payments. Maybe you've decided to make extra student loan payments. You know, all of the other things that you have to have. And then the last item down there is walking around money. So that's the other issue I see sometimes with people's budgets. They get so excited and they say, yeah, I'm going to be so good. I'm going to save so much money. And it's kind of like dieting, right? Like if you plan to just eat salads for 2 meals a day and like a smoothie in the morning, that's going to work for like 2 weeks, maybe at the most. And then you're going to be eating chocolate bars all the time. It's not going to work. So whenever you're making a budget, think of it like a diet. You want to make sure that you incorporate some fun money in there. Plan for things to be kind of spontaneous and to, you know, run into the gas station and get a coffee if you want to, whatever it is. Make sure that you have some budget for that as well. So once you've got your budget, then you really need a secondary budget, right? So a lot of people this year had to kind of dig into the secondary budget. What if something goes wrong? So you've got your good times budget, but if you really need to all of a sudden cut down on your spending, how are you going to do it? And how are you going to do it really quickly? So it could be that you reduce your retirement savings. It could be your emergency fund, which is there for an emergency. Now you're in one, so you do not need to keep adding to it. That goes right out the door. Perhaps you talk to the financial aid office about your student loans, getting those reduced or paused for the time being. If you are in an emergency, perhaps you're not spending as much on gas or, you know, not eating out, things like that. Maybe you cut down to just Hulu instead of Hulu and Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of that, and you reduce your walking around money. So make sure you know quickly how you can cut your budget if you need to. And then if you do become overwhelmed by debt, which is not uncommon at all, especially when your debt is probably the highest it's going to be, if not the highest when you first graduate and your income's the lowest. So it's pretty easy to get behind on all of this. If you do become overwhelmed, just make sure you're setting your priorities. So you have to have a place to live. You want to make sure your utilities stay on, and then you start worrying about car loans and credit cards, things like that. With all of those, it is going to affect your credit if you don't repay any of them. But if you get into the situation where you absolutely can't make a payment, make sure that you're thoughtful about what you are paying. And just like we said before, make sure that you're in contact with all of your creditors. So whether it's student loans or a car loan or anything, the situation will always be much better if you're in contact with them. And if you need help getting in contact with them, or you feel like you don't want to do it alone, you can also, there are lots of places you can go to help get a representative for that. You know, you have to be kind of careful about it, make sure it's someone reputable, but there is help out there if you need someone to help you advocate for yourself. So hopefully that never happens, but just make sure that you kind of know what the plan is in case something like that does happen. And then as a secondary thing, so if you find that you are over your head and your budget just isn't working out, what else can you do, especially on a monthly basis? So you want to make sure that your housing is affordable, your car is affordable. Like I said, go back and negotiate rates with lenders, especially right now with everything going on. There are a lot of lenders that will pick up the phone. They want to keep your business. And so if you were paying, I don't know, if you were paying 24% on a credit card, you can call them and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to pay 15% from now on. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. The worst they can say is no. Make sure that if there's any subscriptions you're not using, you cancel those. Look at your grocery and your shopping habits. Shop around for insurance, especially if you are a car owner and you're driving. Your driving history is going to look really, really different from 18 to 19 to 20. and so forth. And so if the last time that you had a quote on your car insurance was when you were like 20 years old, you might want to look at that again at 22. And then, like we said, go back and explore your student loan options, because that is going to be probably the most flexible debt that you ever take out. It's probably going to be among the largest too for a lot of you, but it's also going to have a lot of flexibility that comes along with it relative to like a car loan or something like that. So just make sure that you explore all of those options. All right, and I said we'd get back to emergency savings. So if you don't already do this, it is never too early or too late to start an emergency savings account. This is probably the biggest difference I see between people at all different salary levels who are struggling financially and who aren't. It's whether or not they have consistently made a habit of having some savings. And so your emergency savings should not be mixed with any other money. It's not the same as your grocery money. It's not the same as money you're saving up for a car or a retirement account at work or anything like that. Emergency savings is just that. It's only for emergencies. So the first step is to figure out what do you need for that account to be full. And some of that is a little bit of math, and some of that is really personal preference. So usually we would say at least 3 to 6 months of what you would need in an emergency. Remember, you had those two budgets, and so multiply that emergency budget by 3 or 6 times. But you may find that you are comfortable with a higher number, and so just figure out what it looks like if it's full. And then that number is going to look really big. You're going to say, I don't know where to get $12,000 from. I don't have it in my couch cushions. That's okay. Just make sure you're contributing to the account regularly until you get there. Make sure that you're not investing it in anything at all. I don't care if it's the safest bond fund out there. I don't care, if it's something that your friend said has only been going up. It doesn't matter. Please do not invest this emergency money. It should be cash. Make it so that if there's an emergency, you can get to it. But again, don't make it so easy to get to that you're dipping into it just because it's the weekend. Make sure you actually use it in an emergency instead of pulling out a credit card. A lot of the time people will work so hard to build up that emergency fund that when an emergency actually comes, they say, oh, I don't want to touch it. I worked so hard to get there. Make sure you actually use it. And then just keep repeating that process, because your life is going to change. And what you need in an emergency now might not be the same as what you need 2 years from now. So make sure you just keep current with that. Then I'm going to touch just briefly on employer programs. That could be a whole nother presentation. And when you get into your first job out of college, hopefully they do give you a presentation on what's available specifically to you. Don't skip that if they're offering it. But in general, there are all these programs out there that are really meant to benefit you, and it's free money sitting there waiting for you to take it. So with a retirement plan, it's great to start saving for retirement as soon as you can anyway. But if they offer a match, they're offering you a salary increase. You just need to put some of your own money into the plan as well. When you're first starting to save for retirement, especially a Roth IRA or 401k or 403b, that Roth designation makes a lot of sense because you pay tax on that money now and you never pay tax on it again. But again, just make sure that you're taking advantage of the retirement plan if they offer it. We talked a little bit about life insurance. If you find that you do need life insurance to cover your student loans, one of the cheapest ways for you to get it may be through work. So don't ignore that when they're talking about life insurance. And a lot of places will actually give it to you for free. So you may be set without having to do anything at all. Many places will also offer a wellness bonus now that's linked up with your health insurance. They want their employees to be healthy. And so they may pay for your gym membership or buy you a Fitbit or even give you cash sometimes for exercising regularly or following some kind of wellness regime. This is something that's really simple and most people wouldn't even consider a benefit, but I do. Almost everywhere I can think of that offers direct deposit, you can split it between several accounts. So if you know that it's kind of hard for you to put away those savings, even if it's $20 a paycheck, you can put that into a separate account right from your employer to the savings account, so that you don't even have to think about saving. It's a really nice way to make it automatic. And then you get into the world of flexible spending accounts and health savings accounts. There's all kinds of different things out there. Be a pest to your HR person until they explain to you how it applies. So every program is a little bit different, and there's so many of them out there today. It's a lot like Carrie's comment about all the student loan repayment programs. It's not applicable to you right now, but it will be soon. So when you get into your first job, make sure that you're taking advantage of their HR department, whatever they give you in terms of a handbook, things like that. And just don't ignore all those programs, because it really is free money at the table. And then when you do get into actually saving for retirement, using your first workplace retirement plan, just a really, really broad advice, just make it something that's easy for you to follow. A lot of times I see that people will not start saving because they're intimidated by the process. They don't know which funds to pick. They don't know, how to make best use of it, or they feel like they don't understand the stock market. That's completely okay. Most plans now are going to offer kind of a default way to save. And so using annual reviews, make sure that you meet with somebody at least once a year to see how things are going. There's something called automatic rebalancing, just making sure that you're in the funds that you want. And then automatic escalation makes it so that if you can only start at 1% of your salary, it's going to automatically go up as time goes on. So just take advantage of the things out there that are really easy to do, that require little or no thought on your part. That's going to make you really successful financially, just by setting yourself up from the start and not trying to mess with it too much. And that's all I've got. Any questions or anything?
Very direct, so it helped me. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah and Carrie. I had just a comment to add. I've heard from employers a lot of times when you're in the interview process for a job, at some point it will include probably a brief meeting with somebody from HR to kind of review the benefits that you would be eligible for if you were offered the position. And what I've heard from HR people is that candidates often just don't ask any questions, or they only ask, the real like one, and it's really kind of an underutilized opportunity to really learn about all the things that Hannah just mentioned. So, take advantage of that moment. And that's usually a part of the interview that's it's easy. It's just, they just want to help answer your questions. So you can't really go wrong. So what else is on anybody's minds? Any other questions out there? One thing that I was wondering if people might ask is, okay, I see there's a question in the chat box. What are some questions to ask HR? So, any of the details about the benefits that Hannah just mentioned. So for example, if there's a flex spending plan, or if there's a retirement plan, when are you eligible to participate in that? And what are the details? Sometimes you have to wait 6 months, sometimes you can start right away. If it is a matching program, what does that mean exactly? Usually that means that as the employee, you put in a minimum amount and the employer matches it. What else? Hannah, any other good questions come to mind?
I may be biased, but I would also ask them whether there's a financial professional that you can meet with as part of your employment, because they can also help you get set up with a personalized plan for you and kind of help you further that discussion. What does your budget look like? How does retirement savings fit into that? So take advantage of something that could normally be a couple hundred or $1,000 to meet with somebody who's a professional. Often it's available right through your employer.
Yeah, that's another good one.
And Toby, if I could add, and you may have experienced this as well, I came to SUNY Plattsburgh in '99, but I had already been employed by a prior college. And naive and nervous, your first, experience, certainly during the interview, certainly the first week of working here and stuff. Those meetings with HR, you get a little bit of that glassy, glazed look, and the information. I should have taken notes. That was my mistake. So I will recommend taking notes during your conversation with HR, or at least read the paperwork they give you when you get home later that night. And I'm not sure, this may not happen much outside of higher education, but, and this wouldn't be relevant to your first employer, but when you go to an employer, when you go to a new job and you have already established a retirement account, I did not understand how to evaluate if I should have stayed with my existing retirement plan or if I should have gone with the other one that my new employer was offering. And I definitely didn't make the right decision back then. And over the years, just, sort of beat myself up a little bit about that. But definitely, if you're coming into a future employer, a second or third or fourth employer, and you've had some experience with benefits and you know that the benefits you're being offered now are somehow different, you may want to understand the differences to decide what's right for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Carrie, I can imagine the decision you're talking about because I think it's pretty common. I know I've got lots of coworkers here at the college who are like, oh, I wish I had really thought that through. One decision, for example, is should I join the state retirement system or should I stay with TIA-CREF or whatever other options there are. And the thing about it at this place of employment anyway, is that once you make that decision, it's permanent. You can't change it. So I think there may be some more flexibility out there than we have here, but yeah, it's a big decision. That's one of the things that our union has talked about actually, is that we need to do a better job of supporting new employees and making these big decisions. There is another question in the chat box, which is, can we discuss the process for financial aid if you're headed to graduate school right after undergrad?
Oh yeah, we can talk about that now, and I'll just give you a quick piece of info, and then when you're ready to head from undergrad to grad, let's have that conversation further. So big difference in financial aid opportunities and the application process when you go from being an undergrad to a grad. I'm going to work on the assumption that throughout your undergrad financial aid experience, when you fill out the application, you've probably listed parental information on your financial aid forms. When you are a graduate student, there's a question on your FAFSA that asks if you will be attending at the graduate level. And by answering yes to that question, you automatically become what we call an independent student. So the FAFSA will bypass all the parental sections of the application. You don't provide any parent info. And they evaluate you just based on your own income and assets, which you would think is a good thing because most of us going from undergrad to grad didn't have a lot of income. So you should get more financial aid. However, the problem is that most financial aid programs aren't available at the graduate level. So things like the federal Pell Grant, the New York State TAP Grant, SEOG Grant, some of the free resources, the New York State Excelsior Scholarship, some of those free resources, our own institutional scholarships or private scholarships you may have received, those generally, most of the time, are not available at the graduate level. Pell, TAP are not available at all. SEOG is not available at all. So generally, graduate students still fill out the FAFSA, are qualified for the federal student loans. There is one grant available for education majors at the graduate level, and then it's really just a lot of student loan debt. However, the colleges that you're looking at for graduate school here and elsewhere may be able to offer you other resources like graduate assistantships or internships or some of their own institutional dollars to help with your program. So definitely different financial aid application process and definitely different sources of financial aid. And some of it will be dependent on the college you go to. Yeah, good question, Trini.
So, who can we reach out to discuss like what our financial aid would look like in the graduate school level, whether it be like here at Plattsburgh or somewhere at the graduate level school, school.
Yeah, definitely use the college you're looking at for graduate school or colleges. Definitely use their websites as a resource for you. Many of them, many graduate schools will offer open houses and graduate school forums in a virtual world now for students who are considering future admissions. And in those forums, they'll have usually a financial aid representative available. Definitely their websites will have guidance on the sources and availability of financial aid, especially if you're looking at more than just a standard, what I'll call a standard master's degree. If you're thinking about law school or med school, programs that have more than maybe 2 years of commitment, which also means more than a couple years of debt and often involve a lot more debt, definitely reach out to the financial aid office at the college that you're looking at or colleges and let them give you some guidance about all those different resources that may be available to you. Don't be surprised that the majority of those resources are going to be student loan debt because that's generally what is the largest amount of support for students at the graduate level. And your career office, Toby and her staff are who really can give you guidance on evaluating what type of career goals and future goals you have in relation to whether it's best to get started in the workforce or maybe go directly into grad school and all those other thoughts and processes as well.
Yeah, definitely. We'd like to help students just be thoughtful about that decision and understand kind of what the cost is going to be versus the benefit when you come out and the salary difference. What's the economy going to look like? That's on our minds right now. Things are kind of, it's going to take a while for them to open up. So for those students who already know they want grad school, I say go for it. But if you're not sure, even in a slow economy, it's a big investment. So you really want to be thoughtful about that. We have another question about deferring. Is it possible, and how do you go about deferring your loans if you are going straight to grad school?
Okay, good question. So if you go from undergrad to grad within your 6-month grace period, so let's give the example, you graduate with your undergrad degree in May and you enter graduate school beginning at the end of August, that's within that 6-month grace period. So in a perfect scenario, you should have to do nothing to automatically postpone your undergraduate student loan debt. That should happen automatically because colleges report out to an entity that then reports to loan servicers that you have re-enrolled, even if it's at a new college. So again, in the perfect scenario, if you go directly from undergrad to grad, your loans should just remain in a deferment status. Those couple months from like May to August, you may possibly hear from your loan servicer because they don't know that you're going to be re-enrolling. And so they may begin contacting you about repayment, but that's okay. Once you re-enroll, your loans automatically go back to an in-school deferment status. Now, the caveat to that, which is important for me to mention, is there are some loans, like maybe a private student loan or your federal nursing loan or your federal Perkins loan. So those loans that aren't managed by one of the federal student loan processors, they may not be aware of your re-enrollment as an automatic thing through this clearinghouse process we use. So you may need to reach out to your loan servicer and say, hey, I've re-enrolled now for a new degree pursuit at either the same college or another college. And then they will put your loan, they may ask for documentation and then they'll put your loan into an in-school status. If there's a break between undergrad and grad, let's say you graduate in May and you begin grad school the next January, it's possible you may have a month or 2 months or 6 months or 8 months of payment due on your undergraduate loans until you start your graduate program. And again, your loan servicer can let you know what repayment plans are available, or if you are concerned about repaying due to income constraints or something, they can give you guidance on deferment or forbearance options during that time frame. But no matter what, when you return to college, if you do so taking at least 6 credits, you will be eligible to have your undergraduate loans postponed for your graduate program in an in-school deferment status.
And then if you do that within the 6 months, when you do graduate, you have to start paying right away, right? You don't get that grace period again?
You actually do get that's a great question. Geez. You actually do get that grace period again. Where you wouldn't, which is maybe what you're referencing, is if you, if it's, so enrollment from spring to fall is considered a natural transition. If you went from, let's say fall, let's say you graduate in December and you begin a grad school program in May, because they're on a different calendar schedule. If it's not the natural transition, you don't go from fall to spring undergrad to grad, or spring to fall undergrad to grad, then they'll start counting your grace period. And so if you've used 3 months of your grace period or 5 months of your grace period, then when you finish your graduate school, you may only have a month left or 3 months left of your grace period. Your new loans that you've borrowed in graduate school still have a 6-month grace period available to them, but you might possibly have used some of your undergraduate grace period. Yeah. Good question.
And Carrie, pretty much any student loan you get, even if you don't have to make payments, you can, correct?
Certainly. Yeah. And definitely. I would encourage you to try to work towards, some type of regular repayment schedule, even if you're not required to be making payments. It's always a good idea to try to pay as you go. I can speak from the experience of all of the professionals in my office. The 5 of us have different experiences with federal student loan debt. Some of us are on the 25-year repayment plan. So it's literally like a mortgage, and they literally will be repaying that student loan for 25 years, that debt, because, in the meantime, they've gone on to grad school and started families and, had financial hiccups and hardships along the way. And then some of us, I chose the route of, I'm going to buy the crappiest car that will get me to work, and I got a really, really cheap house that wasn't that structurally sound, but I had a small mortgage and I got my student loans paid off right away. And, that was the direction I wanted. I just didn't want the debt. And there was this saying back when I went to college, and then it doesn't flow around as much, but it's relevant. Live like a college student. You may have heard that, throughout your college experiences. And I chose to continue living like a college student after college, and keeping my spending to a minimum so that I could pay down my student loan debt super, super quick, because I knew that I would be hitting the age where I am now, where I need to start being a provider for an elderly parent and things like that. So I knew that I wanted my future resources to be available for future expenses. And I didn't want to still have that debt over my shoulders. But no matter what decision you make, first of all, it's a very personal decision on how you manage your student loan debt and all of these budgetary decisions you're making that Hannah went over. It's a very personal decision. Nobody else can make that decision for you and can judge the decision you make. And whatever decision you make, be comfortable with it. You don't need to compare yourself to how your parents are paying back their debt and managing their debt, or your next door neighbor or your best friend. What's right for you is right for you. And if it's right for you to manage a longer repayment that you can budget comfortably, versus paying back your debts as quick as you can and driving a crappy car like I did, whatever decision you make needs to be the right decision for you.
That seems like a great note to end on, unless there are any other questions. I want to thank Hannah and Carrie very much for your very accessible advice. I'm hoping that students are feeling like this is possible and maybe just a little less overwhelmed as graduation approaches. And I want to thank the students for having such great questions and giving us your attention the whole time. So thank you. And please feel free to reach out to any of us with what you need down the road.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.